Hello, welcome again to Fairtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are
the
Fairtax guys, only one of which has the scrolling banner because we haven't figured out how to do that thing that's in the back of your head yet.
I gotta know exactly how to do it. I know exactly what we need to do.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the Zoom technology takes Bob Paxton completely out of the picture.
Well, I could turn off my virtual background, but I guarantee you don't want to see what's behind it.
Right. That's right. It's a working man's kitchen.
Well, last week, if you remember, we talked to Alan Waters, who was a candidate who has signed the Fairtax Candidate Pledge. If you missed last week's program, I would kind of urge you to go back and check it out. Alan's a pretty cool guy. He's exactly the kind. Of course, we got to stop short of it actually endorsing people here, but I can say he's a really cool guy and the kind of person that you'd really like to see carrying the Fairtax banner.
Absolutely, and folks that really get to understand it. And especially the ones that are running for public office, even if it's at the state level. Hey, let me tell you, the Fairtax model can absolutely be worked at the state level as well. And we know a number of states that are doing just that. Oh,
yeah. Alabama and Georgia are both working on replacing their state income tax with a Fairtax style consumption tax. And as soon as we get any real motion on that in either place, we'll certainly let everybody know about it. But one of the problems with running the interview shows, there's not any time to check on the Congress critters.
Yes. Well, it's time. That means it's time for Congress.
That means I can dig in this week and let everybody know what the Congress critters have been up to. That they want to make our tax code more complex, more convoluted, and more unfair every day. And so I've dug up a few goodies here this week. Besides, tell people what we're doing. You go to congress.gov.
Yes.
In the search bar right at the top of the page, you enclose the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes. Then activate the search. And as of the day we're recording this, 1,290 hits on that search.
They've been busy.
Yeah, and that makes sure you just have legislation in the current Congress checked too. And that's how many hits you get on that search when you're looking for what are the Congress critters trying to do to the Internal Revenue Code. At the top of the list of what we found out this week is S 2936. It's a bill to amend the CARES Act and the Internal Revenue Code to modify the treatment of related individuals under the employee retention tax credit. Keywords in that one, employee retention tax credit. I didn't know there was such a thing, but I guess there is.
What do? Run out the door and beg them to come back in and then go fill out a form?
Oh, heck, I don't know.
Retention. I mean, just let me insert right here just a moment.
Go right
Folks,
ahead.
right now, it's hard to find people that want to work at all. Hiring bonuses are phenomenally amount. I figured, I could go actually get 3 jobs right now and make enough money to make a car payment for 6 months.
Yep.
Without having to worry about it. And here we are with the Congress critters, as the other Bob calls them, which I think is a pretty cool name for them, actually. They're out there with the tax code. And what does the tax code have to do with any of those things? Is that just an easy way to legislate, to bring it into the legislative process, or what? I mean, I guess.
Well, I guess related individuals under the employee retention tax credit get some kind of treatment now, and this bill wants to change it. Who knows? What does that have to do with collecting revenue? I mean, that really doesn't make much sense.
But you have to go and look at some other existing part of the tax code to be able to figure out what that is. Okay. Didn't it reference another something that already existed somewhere else?
It really does. You could go on forever with this kind of stuff. But let me move on here. This is one that this one's got lobbyist written all over it in big, bright, flashing red letters. This is HR 5462 to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to repeal the excise tax on indoor tanning services. Something I will admit to knowing absolutely nothing about. I have never been to one of those. But
I have this light here that seems to be giving me a tan.
Well, if there's an
on the sun.
yeah, if there's an excise tax on indoor tanning services and HR 5462 wants to repeal it. Again, the key point there is that the tax code's always changing. You'll get a break, they'll change it, they'll take it away, then they'll give it back, then they'll change it, then they'll take it away. And it just is just one constant thing there's never any end to it.
I wonder if they inadvertently, in some of these new pieces that they're putting in, I wonder if they inadvertently like cancel out something from like 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's all kinds of stuff in there that's in there on a temporary basis. And then there's a bill to make it permanent and on and on and on and on. Okay. S2909, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide a manufacturing investment tax credit and a production tax credit for the manufacturing facilities that produce, wait for it, onshore wind turbine components.
All right. We need more wind turbines.
Well,
we don't have enough hot air up in Washington. We have to get some planted across the country.
Well, I think wind turbines are fine. I mean, I'm for all of the above when it comes to getting energy. You know, fossil fuels, solar, wind, geothermal, the whole nine. Why not use it all?
Plenty of opportunity.
But if you got a manufacturing facility that produces onshore wind turbine components, S2909 wants to provide a manufacturing investment tax credit and a production tax credit. I guess the lobbyists for the geothermal and the solar energy are just not quite as good as the wind energy folks.
But the big thing is as we've said, and we'll continue to say, why use the tax code to bring this about? Is it because of the lobbyists' involvement? Is this just a quick way to tell one of your lobbyist friends that, hey, let me see if I can squeeze this in, and then if that's just the promise is just to get it into the mix, into the mill, so to speak, and then if it never comes to light as a part of a bill or something, I guess that they've done what they said they were going to do, which is introduce it.
Yep. Well, you didn't mean to do this, but you made a perfect lead into this next one. HR 5427. This is the Closing the Bump Stock Loophole Act of 2021. And this one actually had some text in it, so I went in there to dig it out. And it said, in general, section, get this, 5,845 of the Internal Revenue Code is amended. It defines some wording changes it wants to make in there, but it adds a new paragraph defining what a bump stock is. Then it adds a new section defining what a semi-automatic weapon is, and that all is going into the tax code if this bill passes. You just got to shake your head and say, what are these folks doing?
Well, and what we do each week when we talk about what's on Congress.gov is just showing the methods by which our tax code becomes ever more complicated.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, we're going to have enough horsepower behind the fair tax, which is a tax on consumption. For those of you just joining us, the fair tax is not a tax on the fare, which was wrapping up last week in Winston-Salem. It is actually a method of collecting the taxes that the volume of which are already being collected through the income tax without all of the paperwork, you just go, if you want to buy a phone, you buy a new phone, you're going to pay a tax. That's your contribution today for the tax. And you're going to buy a hamburger, or you're going to go on a trip, you're going to pay the tax there. You're buying a new car, etc. Much easier than dealing with every April 15th and the government holding your money out in withholding, and your paycheck is going to be exploding because of the change to the fair tax from the tax on income. And again, people get the words confused a little bit, Bob, I think, and I'll let you get back to Congress.gov, but you say fair tax, flat tax, there's not enough understanding.
Oh, yeah, there's a huge difference. Ron and I did a program not long ago comparing the two, and the fair tax is just totally different. The flat tax and the income tax are just remarkably similar because those two work on the same principle. But
Right, and
again,
you don't get rid of the Internal Revenue Service
yeah,
in the meantime.
yeah, you go
And I've
back.
got a fella here in Winston that I want to talk to, and thank you for reminding me of that. He is a constitutional scholar in his own right, and would certainly give a considerable amount of knowledge from someone who understands the 16th Amendment and say, okay, because that's what's
Well,
got to be eradicated, that has to be removed, and the fair tax, along with the removal of the 16th Amendment, basically shuts down the income tax as a method of taxation going forward. In addition, because we certainly don't want a value added tax like Europe has. We
oh
certainly
yeah,
don't want creeping back into additional taxing. Even with the flat tax, the fair tax gives us that ability to take it and move it from this method, income, to this method, consumption. So if you're frugal and you save your money, then you don't have to worry about taxes on that money.
there you
If
go.
you go out and buy $1 million yacht, well, guess what? You're going to be paying some taxes,
Yep.
and
Well,
anything in between there too.
then your assignment, should you choose to accept it, is to grab your video camera, go out to this guy, record an interview with him, and we'll run it right here on Fairtax
Yes,
Power Radio.
I'm sure he's listening, because he does, and he and I've mentioned the possibility of that.
Okay, well, of course, the stated purpose of this thing is to regulate bump stocks in the same manner as machine guns, and they decide that the tax code is a good way to do that. We're taking a lot of time here. One more I want to get to you. You'll appreciate this one, living there in the art district of Winston-Salem.
Yes.
This is S 2872. To amend the Internal Revenue Code to increase the adjusted gross income limitation for above the line deduction of expenses of performing artist employees and for other purposes.
Okay.
Do I need to read that again for you?
No, I was just going to dial a lawyer to see if he could parse that out for me and get. I mean, well, yes, here in the Arts District, but also Branson, Missouri, Nashville, Tennessee, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, for example, with the performing, with the several live music shows that they have down there. That fits right into affecting all of those businesses.
Apparently, there's a limit on how much above the line deduction for expenses that these performing artists can take, and they want to raise that limit. So there you go. That'll help your folks there in your arts district.
Oh yes,
there we go. Rather extended version of Congress
for joy out in the street right now. I mean, and those things are all good. I mean, everything we talk about, but think about the other side of that. That what you just read may never get into a bill to get passed and signed into law. So it's more of the elected representative who's bringing that into to bear for discussion. It's more about him getting his friend at the lobbying firm to help him out.
Yep. Okay, we got to move along here. You mentioned the other day a communication you got through your radio station's website there that I think is relevant and really brings up a topic we need to touch on. So go.
Well, here we run the show on Sunday mornings. Fellow listened, small businessman, very, very nice, very pleasant. Mentioned that he was thinking about advertising with the station and decided not to because of the right-wing propaganda, the fair tax. And I really wanted to engage in a conversation with him about where he got the idea that the fair tax was right-wing propaganda. And I'll back up a minute and disclaim the fair tax is apolitical. It's not you can't take the fair tax. You can't take a discussion about the method of collecting revenue for the federal government or any government for that matter and say that it's political. It's not. It's just, we're not talking about how much money gets collected. or what it's used for. We're talking about how it's collected and how it makes it easier to manage, not only for the citizenry, but also for the businesses. And this young man was just starting a business, and he said he wanted to advertise, and so he's not going to advertise because of because we run the Fairtax program. And I wanted to reply to him. I did, actually, and his email address came back not found. So, and this is the thing, though. There are a lot of folks that think, okay, well, yeah, the Fairtax. Well, it might be just a superficial response based on how people view any change in government. And
I
now
think
we're in this highly charged political environment where everything gets filtered through this side or that side, or this particular view or that particular view, thanks to the media and thanks to some nefarious activities on both sides of the political aisle.
Cable TV is full of opinion hosts across the entire spectrum. And I think what we're seeing now is it's just a byproduct of that polarization, that everything is looked at through the political spectrum. You remember the Fairtax is over 20 years old. It first went up to Congress in 1999. And when it was first up there were co-sponsors of the Fairtax Act from both sides of the aisle. But for the past several years, none of the Democrats has signed on for the fact, even though last time I looked, I think Democrats would like to have more money in their paycheck every week. I think they would like to just go out to skiing or boating or hiking or whatever on April 15th and not have to worry about tax returns. There are so many benefits to the Fairtax that just benefit people, not necessarily a political ideology. And I guess that's one of the hardest mountains that we as Fairtax people have to climb, is getting people to understand that the Fairtax is not right-wing political ideology. It was not created by right-wing politicians. It was created by businessmen in the private sector out in Houston, Texas in the mid-90s.
That's right. And the other thing too is, it wasn't created in Congress. This isn't something that happened from a political perspective. Economists were the ones that were looked to create this particular method of taxation, this consumption method that takes a look at all different perspectives in terms of making sure that people at the poverty level are taken care of. Fixed by the Prebate. And then the folks that are out there in the cash economy, all of a sudden, in the time that it takes to make the transition from income to consumption, are now paying into the revenue of the federal government for every purchase that they make. And that means undocumented workers. That means people being paid under the table, et cetera, will now, and they're paying at the register, and now they're going to get, the evasion part of taxing is immediately minimized, almost to non-existent.
You see what they're trying to do now. The government wants to look at every transaction in every bank account that has over $600 in it. And the claim is that they're trying to catch tax cheats. But if they want to catch tax cheats, why don't they go to a system that's really, really hard to cheat? I mean, how do you evade a sales tax that's part of the price of the things you buy?
We talk about political ideology in a very distant, we kind of push it off to the side when we talk about the Fairtax and the fact that it is a tax on consumption. It's apolitical. It's not something that is one side or the other, because as you said a minute ago, everybody gets a paycheck at some level. You're going to make money on investments. You're going to make money, providing your expertise or your service. Whether it be hard labor or mental, creative, intellectual capacity, et cetera, and you're going to be paid for that. And at some point in time, you're going to have to fill out a form for the Internal Revenue Service. You're going to have to write a check maybe 4 times a year and that kind of thing. And you end up you end up taking a different look at it when you take a deep breath. And if everybody listening out there can let their friends know, and people that may be passing, listening to the program or watching, will just take a moment and say, you know what, this really isn't a political agenda from one side or the other. This is truly in the apolitical. It is not a political thing. And once that hurdle is passed over, then we can start talking about how it works and why it's better than the method that we're using now.
Well, I say the businessmen out in Texas, they just hired this team of economists, gave them, $20 million worth of budget, and said, here, take this blank sheet of paper and design me the best tax system you can. And what they came up with was not called the fair tax right out of the box, but what they came up with eventually, became what we call today as the fair tax. And it was designed with two things: be fair, be transparent, and raise the same amount of money for the government that the income tax does. That's it. There's nothing in there that advances or hinders either side's political agenda. So the debate over how much to spend, what to spend it on, are we spending too much, that debate still has to happen with the fair tax. The fair tax just simply changes the funding source from income to consumption. And, it puts money in everybody's pocket. It's great.
Right. Even to the federal government, even to the U.S. Treasury, there's probably going to be more money. And then the argument can come, well, why do we need to spend all this extra? Where did all this extra money come from? I can hear everybody in Washington saying, well, the tax on consumption, instead of, how many taxpayers there are, what is it, 150 million?
I think 155 million tax returns. And there's considerably more people than that buying stuff at Walmart.
Right. And you'd never have to file an individual federal tax return again. And the rates are lowered. The effective tax rates are lowered by as much as 67%.
When you expand the tax base, each individual's portion of the overall burden goes down.
Right.
Even though you tell people the fair tax is 23% inclusive and they recoil in horror at the sight of a 23% sales tax. But once you explain what the prebate is, your spending up to your poverty level is refunded back to you. That's tax free. Right. So if you spend right around the poverty level, your tax rate is next to nothing, or actually could be negative.
Yeah. And the average family of four, get this now, in case you haven't thought about this, folks, for some time, in the prebate scenario, which is basically a refund of money that you haven't spent yet. The family of four receives over $7,300 a year annually.
Yeah, break that down. That's $661 a month.
Yeah, and it gets reset. It gets looked at every year. The poverty level number gets looked at every year, and then based on the grid of single person, 2-person family, et cetera, you end up getting that money. And think about that in terms of a withholding out of a paycheck. Yeah, and you really have to start looking at that stub on a weekly basis and realize how much is actually coming out that you're not able to spend for a whole year. And then, of course, you get the refund, and, after you send in your tax returns every year, and you turn out, buying a new car or television set, or, maybe you go on a vacation or something. But imagine being able to budget with $7,300+ a year, a family of four, in the prebate.
Yeah, I would love to have $661. Well, I don't have a family of four, it's just me and my wife, but I'd still love to have several $100s a month and not have any taxes taken out of my pension and Social Security benefits.
Right, which is already taxed anyway.
Bring home your whole paycheck.
Goodness.
Get the tax refund every month. Oh, but only conservatives like that idea.
Well, I mean, but that's
I don't think so.
And it's a knee-jerk deal, unfortunately. And people look at it as, oh, well, we can't do that because conservatives do that, or Democrats or Republicans, but it actually, if you can, and this is the appeal that I would have today for everybody listening, get engaged in a conversation with someone, your friend, and the fellow that got in touch with me. I really hope he calls back or comes in or sits down for a minute, because if he's starting a small business, he really should consider this.
Ask him how much he's going to have to spend on accountants and tax lawyers and stuff like that.
Well, and again, it may just be, and again, it's part of the challenge of the fair tax movement to be able to articulate what the fair tax is, and essentially what it isn't. It isn't a political movement from one party or another. It is a method, changing the method of taxation. So we go from 155 million tax filers under the current system, like Bob said, and then we go to 250 million fair tax payers.
Consumers, yes.
The consumers. Not enough consuming going on. I don't know if anybody remembers Fritz Hollings, one of the senators from South Carolina.
I do. I'm that old, yes.
He was all about the consumer. But one of the lines that came out of a comment that he made about all the economic activity was that it's too much consuming going on.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what.
Adults, international tourists, undocumented workers, folks that are passing through the underground economy, all comes to the cash register to buy whatever they're going to buy. And that's where the tax, I can't imagine that somebody would say, well, it's a political ploy by this side or that side, because it's not. It sits in the middle. It's just we're just changing the method.
Yeah, well, I'd love to hear at the fairtaxguys@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from someone who thinks it is political and their reasons why. I'd like to get into their thinking and then be able to engage them in a real conversation about what it's like. But tell me, if you're out there, if your friend out there says, why do you think it's right wing? What is right wing about it? What is right wing about having more money in your paycheck and getting a tax refund every month? I guess the one thing I can think of that they might say is, well, if we do it that way, we can no longer use the tax code to social engineer folks and to make steer them in one direction or another, and give them a tax credit for a electric vehicle and charge them a tax surcharge for something else.
The other side of that, Bob, is that people, we all grew up. We're young enough now. We don't remember what it was like prior to World War I, when the income tax was implemented, supposedly only temporarily. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, we're about out of time. You'll have to save that thought, and we'll continue it next week, because we are flat done with this edition of Fairtax Power Radio. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
The Fairtax Guys again reminding you that the fair tax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you will demand it.
The fair tax does not hurt the poor and does not reward the rich, because it's not a straight sales tax like the sales tax we already have. The fair tax creates a level playing field by taxing everyone at the same rate at the cash register, but untaxes the household up to poverty level. This means that those living closer to the poverty level pay a lower overall tax rate, while those living a lavish lifestyle pay a higher overall tax rate. Yet the law still applies to everyone equally. This is called the Prebate, which reimburses every legal American household the taxes they will have to pay on the basic necessities each month. As those basic necessities vary by household, the fair tax untaxes you and not the purchases. This keeps tax lobbyists out of the picture and keeps you in control of what you pay. Do you think the Prebate will be too expensive and act just like a huge welfare program? The Prebate will cost less than half of what the current deductions and exemptions cost, and operates just like the standard deduction you already take. It's your money. You're just getting it back each month rather than once a year. Everyone under the fair tax controls their own tax rate by deciding when and how much money they spend above poverty level, and thus how much they pay in taxes. To learn more, please visit fairtax.org, and be sure to like us on social media to help educate your friends and spread the word.